All right, we are live. Welcome to AmeriCanaries Podcast number 12. Today, we are honored with the presence of Connor Southwell, who covers Norwich for the Eastern Daily Press, the Pinkin, and who else, Connor?
Norwich Evening News, I think. That's the only one you've missed, I think. But yeah, those three.
Norwich Evening News. So over here in the US of A, we would call him a beat writer. Are you called a beat writer over there?
No, that's a new one on me. So that's good. I
So
think I'm
it's like
just reporter. I think I
Okay.
tend to go with, but I'm beat reporter is
right.
I'm happy
Beat
for
writer,
that, yeah.
you're on the beat. You know, is
That's the
what it's
saying.
called.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah, you're on the beat. So, a friend of my son's, because my son has a journalism degree from University of Maryland. He has quite a few friends who are covering teams. One's covering, she's covering now the Dallas Mavericks, and then a good friend of his is in Mississippi covering Mississippi State University athletics. So they're the beat reporters for each of those.
Interesting. Right.
Yeah,
Good to know. Interesting.
The beat reporter. And joining us is Mark Foster, resplendent in his Kansas City Chiefs. Is that a jacket, hoodie?
It's a pullover. It's not a hoodie, actually. It doesn't have pockets either. It's just a pullover.
Pullover. The founder and the co-founder and Stick It Guru as the envelope. So what do we have here? Jeff just sent me stickers. I'm looking for the envelope here, and the return address said Stick It Guru, Sticker Guru, which is so Jeff Ewick is joining us. So Connor is going to be the first of the Norwich media that we're going to try to have on the podcast. We're also reaching out to some national media and then seeing if we can, who are covering the Premier League either through the US or through England or even through ESPN. So we're going to see, if we get any bites from anybody through the different connections that we have and try to expand who we're having on the podcast as guests. In the past, as you know, we've had fans from around the country, and we have had the parents of Jonathan Tompkinson. So I don't know if you knew that, Connor. So we had both his mom and his dad on at separate times.
Brilliant.
So
yeah. I'll have to go back and make sure I listen to that one. That sounds interesting.
There's two of them. The one from his mom was the Thanksgiving episode. That's about 2 hours long because we did a lot of discussion on things. A lot of Thanksgiving topics were in that. And she's got a very interesting athletic background. Certainly not a typical sports mom. This is someone who really is quite an athlete and really understands what goes into making a top class athlete and everything around that. So she really gave us a pretty good understanding of Jonathan's development and what went into it and her part in it. Not just, yay, good goal. She really understood what's going on athletically and intellectually and some other things. So that was a very interesting conversation. And then his dad, who actually is English, came on a couple weeks ago and gave us, a very slightly different perspective. And I think he's watched more of the under 23s play, and him being over there, he's got a little more of a connection to, the game in England than his mom does. But it was pretty interesting getting both their viewpoints.
Yeah, I bet. I heard a little while ago that he's actually got some Suffolk connections. I don't know if they mentioned that.
Yes, he did. That was We ribbed him a little. We ribbed him a little bit for that. Well,
hey, he's crossed the dark side now, hasn't he? So it's all good.
Yeah. Well, the 30-second explanation is that Jonathan was originally hooked up with that team down in Suffolk, training with them, and then his contact moved to Norwich, and then Jonathan, his dad, contacted him and said, "Oh, sure, yeah, you're a good player. Come join us." So that's how he wound up, playing for Norwich. Because
what a relief!
That guy moved, and I don't know his name. I'm sure it's on the podcast somewhere.
I've forgotten it.
Right.
Tip of the tongue, but he's a scout and youth. He's one of the youth guys that had come over, and as soon as I could pull it up, and as soon as I see it, it'd be like duh. But if I go hunting it down right now,
Right, isn't it? Is that his last name? I've got that in my head, but I may be wrong. There was a coach, wasn't there, who came across?
Yeah.
Coach.
Sorry, I'm chatting with Ryan right now. He's saying Cooper's not having a great day, giving mom a break. So Ryan's got daddy duty, it looks like.
I'm not sure what you're talking about, Mark.
Ryan Austin.
Oh,
our Ryan.
Oh, Ryan. Okay, Ryan. Yeah.
He may try to get on, but he's
Gotcha.
gonna get murdered if he wakes up if Cooper wakes up while he's on the pod.
Okay.
So
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, yeah. So Ryan's son, the other member of the group, his son is wearing the away kit, so it means he's wearing the away kit more than the team has, which I don't understand what's going on with that. And so
he's 2 for 2 for his selection.
He's 2 for 2. 2 for 2 goal differential 4. So he's that's pretty happy with that. So Ryan's in New York City, I think the Queens actually, so not in Manhattan. He's in Queens. Unfortunately, I was up there with my daughter and I was trying to hook up with him, wound up not being able to do it because at the time his wife was, like a month and a half away from giving birth, and they were very involved with making sure everything was ready, for the child. So kid is Cooper. All right, so let's get some of the stuff from Connor before we start talking about how nice it is to not be in a relegation zone anymore. Which is just outstanding. So gave Connor a list of questions, so let's go through them. So where are you from, Connor?
From Norwich. So I was born here. I was born in the old hospital, which maybe is a good reference point for people. And yeah, I mean, all my family, we tried to, quite comically, we tried to do a family tree a couple of years ago. And we went back probably 6-7 generations, and the majority of them all came from Norfolk. So I'm very much Norfolk born and bred. But yeah, from Norwich. My family are from Norwich, so yeah, very, very much local to the area, which is helpful, I think, when you do the job, because it helps you with the connection, I suppose, that people feel, not just to the club but to the area generally. There's quite a lot of pride, I sense anyway, from people from Norfolk. So it's nice to be able to experience that in the role that I have, I suppose. So yeah, it's been nearly 22 years here, and I've got no inclination to move away. So yeah, very, very happily Norfolk born and bred.
Nice. I noticed here in the United States, lots of people, it's like, oh, my dream job, I'm covering my boyhood team, for those who are lucky enough to, find jobs in their local area. It's really something they very much get into, but of course they have to balance, okay, I'm really a fan of this team, but I need to report it, kind of with no bias, which is kind of hard sometimes. When you're a reporter, if they're like broadcasting on the air, on TV, there's sometimes the bias will, sneak in, which, doesn't bother too many people. If it's like, someone who's openly rooting for the team to do well because that's where they grew up. It's kind of interesting. So next question, where'd you go? I know it's university as opposed to college.
Yeah, so my route into this job is maybe a little bit different to most people, because I think traditionally it's 3 years at uni. You either then get a degree and get a job or whatever, or maybe you do an extra year at uni to specialize in. I only did 1 year at university, and I actually studied media at UEA. So again, I stayed local. I stayed around. I didn't really have any desire to go anywhere else. I don't drink or anything like that. So kind of the university culture wasn't particularly one that I was necessarily interested in. I don't know if you get the sense, but I'm not a massive party animal. I don't know if that comes across, but But, so I kind of felt, I've got a good university on my doorstep. I would utilize that. And I did 1 year of media studies, really enjoyed it. It was a completely different experience to what I had at school, obviously. Did 1 year there. And then kind of just literally a few weeks before I was going to go back, got offered the job that I was in. So I didn't get to experience uni in its full form, so to speak, but I had a little taste of it, and the bit that I did have was very enjoyable, to be honest. So, yeah, university. But when it comes to kind of dropout numbers, I'll be amongst those. Sadly, but for good reasons rather than bad reasons, I suppose.
Gotcha. Yeah. Last week our guest was Robin Sainty, who I'm sure you know.
Yeah, I know Robin well. Yeah.
Yeah, a proud Cambridge graduate. So.
Yeah, I wasn't quite on his intelligence level, but I got by.
Okay, so what journalism experience did you have prior to joining, the Eastern Daily Press?
So a lot of it was self-made, I suppose, is the way I would use it. I don't know if you guys are familiar with my football writer. I did a lot of work with that, thanks to Gary Gowers, who, essentially I wrote an email to when I was 16, 17 and said, I really want to write about football. I don't know if I'm very good. I don't think I am. And he said, fine, and gave me a platform. And that was really the first time that someone had opened a door for me. And so I did the written stuff, but I also had an interest in kind of the video side, the podcast side. Mm-hmm. And that's when we kind of formed the YouTube channel that we eventually did, which, we had an interview with Stuart Webber on there, which was the first video that we did. I managed to get one of my old high school friends, Ben Ambrose, who, again, you guys might be familiar with, does some stuff in the fan media sphere, and really good guy. I asked him to come and essentially do all the stuff behind the scenes. So the filming, the editing, stuff that necessarily wasn't my strong point. And later he agreed to come on screen. I literally had to wrestle him on, which is quite funny, I think, considering how naturally he is at it now. And it went from there, really. And that was a lot of stuff I did. I had a little spell with Norwich City for a little while. I did some writing and video for those guys. And that was it, really. I tried to just keep as many doors open as I could. I didn't want to necessarily just go down the writing route or just go down the video route, because I think you can close yourself off quite quickly in this industry. So I wanted to, mainly because I enjoy all aspects of them. I enjoy writing. I enjoy doing this kind of stuff. Eventually an opportunity popped up. It wasn't one that I was expecting, and it wasn't one that I necessarily thought I'd get. But, I thought I'd apply for it, simply because I thought if I'm sat there in 20 years' time, it might be something that I regretted. And I thought the process will still be useful, because who knows, if I get an interview, that's still an incredibly useful experience to have for anybody. So stuck a CV in, obviously got an interview, and obviously did better than I expected. So that was kind of it, really. It was a combination of luck, hard work. I remember doing some of the football stuff when I was in sixth form. I don't know what that relates to you guys in terms of education, but kind of the go between high school and uni, and it was hard work, to be honest. I found sixth form a lot harder than I found uni, for example. Not everyone does, but I did. And so I'd have long days. I'd wake up at 7 in the morning and go to bed at 11 at night, and finish work at 9 o'clock at night, and then think, right, I've got to write something on Norwich now as well, because I wanted to keep that on top. So I wouldn't advise anyone to do that. So that's kind of how I got into it. Maybe stumbled in it, maybe got lucky, had some good people helping me along the way. But I was incredibly fortunate and loved every second of everything that I did with kind of the fan media side of it, really.
You said it's sixth form?
Yeah.
Form. Yeah. So that is, I'm trying to think, that's 16 to 18. So it's 2 years, kind of after school. So I did sixth form. I don't know if you guys know what it would be, really. 16 to 18, what that would be.
I mean, that's high school.
It's high school, yeah. It's like the last bit of high school, finishing up high school.
It's high school. The only thing I can correlate it to is there's some kids, and you see it more in the college athletic field. They'll go to a prep school for a year, and
Right.
it's a
Maybe.
preparatory
Or a junior
school.
college, something maybe like that.
No, or maybe well, but
At
he said
18.
he said
At
he did like 3 years, but they'll do like there's preparatory academies for kids that need some assistance. Some are a little bit militaristic, and then that gives them the grades and the discipline to actually then go to a college and play sports or whatever. So that's the only thing I can sort of correlate that to. But that's specifically, for that example. It's like kids who aren't necessarily ready for college. We have a community college system here. My daughter is in the local community college, which is excellent. Although I must say there's lots of red tape for the community college. It's just annoying. You tend to think it'd be much easier than a full the college. So community college, the idea is you get an associate's degree for 2 years. For 2 year, especially 2 years, and then that basically allows you to transfer anywhere within state to one of these state schools. So I'm in Maryland, Mark's in Texas. There's tons of schools in Texas, and Jeff is in South Carolina. So the local community college would allow my daughter to then transfer all her credits to one of these state schools, University of Maryland, a couple of the satellite campuses, and there's a variety of other schools around the state. Maryland's not very big, if you look on a map. Lots of people, but not very big geographically. So the way of that, my degrees, I have 2 degrees. I have a degree from University of Maryland, engineering, and Master of Science Business from Johns Hopkins. So since we're just talking about it, so I have lots of Maryland stuff in the room. It's not showing behind me, but there's like in the corner over here, like my Maryland corners over here.
Yeah, so I don't have a degree, which is the interesting point maybe for the job that I do, because there are lots of people who do have a degree to do the job that I do, but my focus fairly early on, and I was one of these kids who didn't really know what I wanted to do, because I wanted to be involved in football. I didn't know what that looked like. I wasn't good enough to play. I learned that pretty quickly. And so it was about, how do I get into it? Do you actually go and try and work in a football club, or do you want to write about it? And for me, I found that I enjoyed watching the game, speaking about the game, writing about the game eventually. And so for me, it as soon as I did that, it was kind of tunnel vision. I kind of plotted a pathway of how to get to where I wanted to get to, and then you work back from there. What do you need to do? So my route was very much, right, so I need this amount of GCSEs, which again is kind of what you get from high school in England. Then obviously sixth form. So again, to go in a bit more detail, you have GCSEs, and then you kind of have the sort of A levels. So they're just kind of the in between high school and uni basically. But you need certain amount of A levels to get into certain unis. So for me, I needed 3 Bs to get into UEA, which I got, thankfully, and that allowed me then to go to uni, if that made sense. And what I would have done was had 3 years doing media before, because what I said earlier, I wanted to keep it quite broad, and then would have gone and done a specific journalism year, for example. So that was kind of how I had it planned. But all of this was with a pathway of getting to a job where I was reporting on football, and then one appeared after kind of year one. So it allowed me to get
a job reporting on football without having to complete it, it's like,
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And that was very much the way I viewed it. So in the end, when the phone call came and it was, we'd like to offer you the job, it was a bit of a no-brainer, to be honest, because
absolutely,
when I got that route, it kind of meant that I was there quicker than I expected, which was obviously a really good thing. But that was because of the work I'd done with my football writer and kind of the hours and stuff I put in on my own back. So my advice to anyone who wants to get into this industry in particular, it's very tough and there's a lot of competition, as I'm sure you guys are aware. You're releasing a podcast, there's so many of them. You have to have experience now, I think, and increasingly that feels, certainly again over here and certainly from my experience, the experience that I assembled was more useful than the kind of accolades and education that I got, for example. So even though education is very useful, I'm not telling people to leave school at 16, because that's not ideal. You need education, but if you can get both of them, that's pretty spot on.
That's a how-to for the trailblazer right there, folks.
Yeah.
Oh, and since we mentioned colleges, I have to mention Jeff went to a school north of me that is a big rival of my school. So Jeff can talk about his
Hey, he's getting out of the room now.
his school. Like we don't talk about that team in Suffolk. Jeff is getting his.
That was a cue for him to go get another beer.
Oh, I thought you
No,
can tell him
I am definitely not taking the bait, Ken. I'm trying to stick to the program. So I went to get the list. I went to get the list of questions, mate. That's what I did.
Gotcha. All right.
Stop swerving all over the highway here.
Yeah. So Jeff can tell you where he's from, but he's from a major state university directly north of Maryland. So in the map, you can figure out which one that might fit. Okay. Next question. How many articles per week do you average? Do you have a clue?
Oh, good question. So again, it shifted a little bit because we've kind of, without going in too much detail, which is quite dry, we've kind of shifted the way we work from obviously the websites, which I'm sure everyone will be aware of, pinken.com and stuff like that. We've obviously now moved to a model of the Pinken app, which again is a kind of different way of working. So hopefully, whether this pans out in reality or not, the idea is that we write fewer articles, but the articles we do write have more quality in them. So per day, I would say it's probably gone from anywhere between 5 and 10 to anywhere between about 4 and 8 at the moment. We're again trying to work out the exact shift of that. So I'm trying to work that out over a week, but maths was never my strong point. But you can times it over 5 or 7 and you get the number. So yeah, just in the last couple of months, for example, it's shifted and it's kind of a different way to doing things, how I did things in my first 2 years with Arch and with the EDP and Pinken and whatnot. So we're still trying to adjust to it and work out exactly what people want to see and exactly what it looks like. And I think we're getting to a place now where we're quite happy with it. But so it's shifted a bit, but it's quite a few. Obviously, some days are busier than others because some days you get more news than other days. That's just life, isn't it? That's one thing you can't control when the news happens. It's just when it happens, you have to be there to react to it. So like this month is a perfect example because it's a transfer window, obviously very quiet for Norwich, but like you can get a message, you can get an email, you can get a phone call saying right, X is going to happen in 2 hours, and suddenly the whole complexion of your day changes. So it's sometimes hard to put a number on, but on average, I would say about 4 to 8 at the moment, which is probably
because I would tend to think that in a normal week you have the presser, an article out of that, an article before the match, an article or two after the match. You probably have what we call a gamer. If you guys use that same, like the gamer is this is what happened. And then you have more of like an analysis or commentary piece. That's what I'm.
That's right. Yeah. So we'd have, the match cycle is the most intense really because after a game, everyone kind of gets to go home, and Friday night was a good example. We didn't leave Vicarage Road till about midnight. So that gives you a good indication. It's a really intense 4-hour period, kind of before the game and after the game. Particularly when there's a newspaper. So usually if a game is on a Saturday, we don't have a newspaper on a Sunday. So that takes a little bit of the pressure off in terms of, right, things need to be done at this time. But it was Friday at night. It was an 8 o'clock kickoff in the UK. We had a deadline for 20 past 11. Then you add in a floodlight delay of 12 minutes, which wasn't really helpful, by the way. And it just ramps everything up a little bit. But we got there, and the paper got out, as far as I'm aware. So that's good. But you're right. So we'd have a match report, and then so my colleague Paddy does Paddy's pointers on the app, which is kind of an instant analysis. And then the next kind of 3 days, we maybe we'll dig down into specific players who played well or didn't play well, and try and provide the reasons for that. So it is interesting, and we try and do new things, and we try and think about different ways of doing things. But you kind of had those kind of pillars of content every week, which are there that you rely on, that people like, and hopefully it's about finding the balance between that and some stuff that we can kind of experiment with, play around with, but still maybe offers something to an audience. That's kind of the idea with what we're doing.
Gotcha.
How do you guys do that, Connor? Sorry to interrupt, Ken. How do you guys do that? I mean, do you, Dave, and Pat sit around and say, okay, well, you draw straws. You say, well, I'll write about this and you write about that, or is it all just a kind of free for all? Who writes about what?
Yeah, so it can depend. So I might wake up in the morning and say, I've got a brilliant idea I'm going to do, or I can say, right, I've watched the game, or I've had a look at the stats, and I think, let's say Max Aarons, I think he had a really good performance and he went under the radar and it wasn't really mentioned because of obviously the focus on Josh Sargent. So I'm gonna do a piece on that, for example. Other days it could be it could come from the editor. It could be that I've got a column on a certain day and I say, guys, I don't really know what I'm going to do, and then they'll chuck some ideas in. So it's quite fluid. So if I've got an idea, I mean, I don't recall a situation where I've come in and said, right, I've got this idea, and I don't write about it, basically. So it's quite nice to have a freedom that you can kind of say, I want to write about this topic, and then you're allowed to write about it, and I'm sure the guys will say the same. So yeah, it kind of varies and it kind of depends. We try and break things up evenly so people just don't get 15 articles of me droning on. They get kind of other informed bits from the other two, and obviously the columnists we have as well. So yeah, we try and break it up. We try and kind of bounce ideas off each other. We try and think of new ideas, and we try and do things maybe in a bit of a different way. So yeah, it kind of a mixture of all of those things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I the reason I asked is because it seems like you all work very cooperatively, very well together, and it is a varied output, if you will, of who writes about what. And I just wondered what the mechanics were behind the scenes.
Yeah, so some stuff is set. So, for example, if all three of us are at a game, I'll always do the match report. Dave will always do the updates, which are live. And Paddy will always do his pointers and speak to the manager. Dave will always speak to the player. I'll then do some other stuff behind the scenes, social reaction. Maybe if there's a specific moment to write about in a bit more detail after the game, then I'll do something like that. So there are kind of, on a match day, we do have pillars of content, but day to day, it's a bit of a free for all, really, and we can kind of bounce ideas off each other. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you use Slack to discuss your stories?
No, so obviously it's changed a little bit because when I started, it was we'd all sit in person around a desk,
right.
So we could all bounce the ideas off each other that way. Now we don't do that. We all work from home more often than not. So it's usually Microsoft Teams actually that a lot of our conversations take place on, be it through the chat function or be it through the video call function. So. Yeah, we've got ways and means of kind of discussing stuff and what we're going to talk about and stuff. So, yeah, we predominantly use that.
Because my son, being he was on the journalism staff of the school paper at the University of Maryland. They use Slack a lot and use that. They still actually there's an alumni group that uses Slack, which is kind of neat for them to talk. I was curious to use that. I also, through his experience, both there and he was an editor for the regional sports company that covers the Baltimore Orioles and the Washington Nationals, and he edited 4 writers' articles, depending, who it was. So each team had, two writers, and depending which he was assigned to, he would edit their stories. So I know if, let's say, the Orioles game, it ended at 11. To leave at 11:30 to come pick them up at the stadium. So, they'd be there for at least hour and a half, afterwards, but they weren't necessarily writing gamers, because how they, they were sort of reporters who were working for the same company that broadcast the matches, that broadcast the games. So they didn't necessarily write gamer. It was more like instant reactions and things like that. So they didn't necessarily do that. And also, when I was younger, probably about your age, I worked for the Baltimore Colts, and I have the sign sitting over here from the training camp. I haven't shown them. What was that noise? My Lord. My wife's doing
that might have been my chair.
Your chair. Okay, I thought it was.
Sorry.
I have I worked Baltimore Colts training camp the year before they left town, so I worked with the media and PR department. So I was very involved with knowing who was covering the team, what their deadlines were, and had the opportunity to interact with all the media who are covering it and all the players, because it would be, let's say if you were a reporter, yeah, hey Ken, Connor wants to talk to uh, this particular wide receiver at 2 p.m. In the bench outside this office, that I'd make sure I get that wide receiver, and hook them up and whatever, So it's a fantastic job. It was free as volunteer for doing that, but I really understood what the deadlines were, what the stories were, how they called in everything at that time. The faxes, they had telex. Sometimes I'd have to be in the general manager's office and getting something. Oh, we have a telex message. Take this to your boss. So I interacted with everybody on the team, and so I really got a pretty good understanding of what the deadlines were from that, and then from my son's experience. So I was just curious, what it was. So I have a clue of, what's going on, and I subscribe to the local paper, the print edition, of the not the Sun, the Baltimore Sun, even though it's called the Sun, the Baltimore Sun, and we know, some people some of his friends work there, not in the sports area, so it's interesting. So you do a podcast, right?
Yes, we do. Yeah, every week, which is sometimes quite a tough listen, I would imagine, certainly at points during this season. But we're yet to record the one on Friday's game, so I'm looking forward to that, because it's going to be a nice, optimistic one, which will make a nice change, because I wasn't actually on the one last week. So yeah, weekly podcast. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ours is not weekly. There are times where we're like, we don't have anything to talk about. So it's generally weekly. We try to do ours on Monday, but if we're getting people from England to come on, we're going to be much more flexible because of the time difference. So we appreciate you, making time come on. So we're trying to see if we can get someone Sunday. We have already two. We have both Chris Gorham and Chris Reeve have agreed to come on. So I think we're going to try to do President's Day with one of them. That's a Monday. And I think the three of us here, and hopefully Ryan will be available, because we're all work for government, and so I'm federal. Mark's local as a school teacher, and Jeff works for the University of South Carolina system. So we all sort of have that day off. So we're hoping to leverage that and have that in the future, but to have people come on. So that's when we normally do ours, record it, and then it shows up the next day, because the process that we have to go through using the free software and stuff that's available to us as part of this was, how can we do it for free? Your podcast probably isn't free. You probably, pay for something and have your own dedicated channel and things like that, because it's more professional. We're not looking for subscribers, looking for members. We want to, expand our reach. You guys are looking for subscribers so that you can, get money so you can have a non-beer.
Yeah, exactly.
Because these two are drinking beers. This is just water in here.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm on a fizzy drink, so I'm all right. I'm keeping. It's usually tea, to be fair, which I've got one that I had beforehand down there, but it's all gone now. But yeah, that's it. So funny enough, we use the platform that we're using right now, StreamYard, but we have, you're right, we have a subscription to that, so we can kind of sort of, I don't know what you guys have the ability to do on the free one, but we can kind of change it and have backgrounds and stuff, and that it's just helped the way that we do stuff, really. But primarily we try and record the podcast in person. Obviously that's been very difficult over the last couple of years, but if there's particularly home games, we tend to do because our office is about a 20-minute walk from Carrow Road. Carrow Road is obviously on everyone knows where it is. We're on sort of Ruin Road, which is not a million miles away. So after a game, we will go back to the office, and as a rule, we'll do a podcast. Away games are a little bit different because sometimes, as I mentioned, you're in the stadium 2 hours after a game is finished. You've then got usually a longish journey home. Free sometimes can be 4.5 hours, sometimes 5 hours. You're essentially adding an hour onto a long trip already. So it really depends with that one. We tend to kind of sit back and do it a day later if it's an away game. So it depends, but as a general rule, we try and get them out as soon as possible after a game because that's the shelf life, isn't it? Really, I think most people want to absorb things immediately after the game. If you're talking about a game on a Thursday, then I think you've missed the boat a little bit, So that's what we try and do. Obviously, our podcasts are free, so people can listen to them whether they're subscribers to our app or not. Likewise with our videos, and that's just because that's how we want to do things, but yeah, it's been hard, as I'm sure you guys are aware, to talk about Norwich City at points this season. So I'm really happy to be on a podcast at a point where we're talking about a win and about an American striker doing it. It seems quite apt, doesn't it?
Yeah, Captain America. So before, who was it? Rob Stone, who was a host for Fox Sports when Fox had the Premier League. Anytime an American would do anything, he would always introduce, lots of times it was Jeff Cameron. It was like, Jeff Cameron, the American. That was always his bit. So I need to find, him recording something, So if he was in the studio and he's not, because he's with Fox, not NBC, it would be, and Josh Sargent, the American, with the scorpion, So he's still doing stuff. He's still like a studio host. But that was like his, bit in X, Y, and Z. So you mentioned a little bit about the difference between home and away. That's the next one. A typical match day at Carrow Road versus away. Since you just did Watford, and one thing I saw Michael Bailey said he really liked the Watford Stadium, Vicarage Road. He called it like a smart stadium or something. He was impressed with the overall design of it. That's just interesting. So can you compare and contrast? Typical day at Carrow Road, and then how different that is from an away game.
Yeah, they're really different. So I can really only talk you through my days for both of those. But for a home game, let's say a conventional 3:00 kickoff, because that's I think a bit different in the Premier League because games are moved here, there, and everywhere. But as a general rule of thumb, Saturday 3:00, I try and wake up. I'll say relatively early, but maybe it's not relatively early. About 8:00, maybe early, depending on who you are and what your life is like. But around 7:30, 8:00, I try and get out and go for a run if I can, just around my area. I tend to find that helps me just get ready. I can think about things in maybe a bit more of a considered way before the game, and maybe I'm quite sad in that regard. I'll think about the game before the game, maybe not. So then I'll come back and predominantly then it's about kind of setting up what you're going to do. So we have it's called a content management system. Again, I won't go too dry, but you basically set up your stories before you're ready to go. So you have a base of what you're going to do and stuff. So I'll do that. And then from about 11:30, usually there's a lunchtime game here, so I tend to watch the build up for that. 15 minutes of that, and then I'll probably leave and drive down to our car park and then walk to Carrow Road to make sure I'm in the ground sort of long before the team news drops at 2, which is really when my first sort of port of call comes. We're fortunate, I'll whisper this quietly, we're fortunate enough when we get to the ground to be given food, which is a massive plus. So again, mention that quietly, no one noticed, I don't think. So it just gives us a little bit of time to enjoy that, to sort of shift through the programme. And just really, I tend to feel if you get to a game late and you're rushed, everything else feels rushed. So try and make enough time to get there so I can take in my surroundings, I can set up accordingly, I can get myself in the right frame of mind, because it is a very intense period. Then 2:00, me and Paddy will go live on our social channels. The team news will drop, we'll go through that, and then you're into game mode. The game starts, then it's about obviously doing the content after the game and whatnot. And I would say when it's all done, when the content's up, when the podcast is recorded, I tend to get back about 8:30, 9 o'clock for a 3 o'clock kickoff. So that's at home. I really enjoy away days. I really enjoy them. It just means that, we get to sit in a car for however long and talk about football as a general rule. So we do, unless it's early in the morning and there's a few grumpy faces. Not that my colleagues are like that.
Do you ever stay overnight before?
Yes. Yeah. So that is the case, but it's usually for maybe the ones in the Northwest. So I'm trying to think of examples where we've done it this season. Newcastle is a good example where we stayed overnight. That was obviously on a Tuesday night, so a little bit different. But
is that the furthest? Is that the furthest right now in the Premier League? Furthest trip?
Yes, yeah, it is. It is. So that was on a Tuesday night as well. So we had to stay over after the game for that one. But what we tend to do for kind of, again, a Saturday 3 o'clock, if it was in, I don't know, Burnley, where we stayed overnight before, as a good example. Maybe we'd sort of drive 3 hours up the road. We'd stay in a hotel overnight, and then we'd do an hour in the morning, and it breaks it up a little bit. Particularly when you've got the long drive in the other direction. So, we do that at times for certain games, not every single one, because I don't think we'd be allowed to do that. So it's good. I like away games. They're good. They're a different experience. I think it's more of a feel of an experience than a home game. You can kind of make a whole day of an away day, can't you? So, particularly when it's like Friday night and it's like that, I think there's very few things better in life, to be honest. But again, probably shows how sad I am. So yeah, the 2 days vary completely. But there are points if Norwich have lost 3-0 and you've just left a service station and you've got 3 hours left of your journey where you do contemplate life a little bit. But yeah, obviously that's probably the same for everyone.
So do you normally get there via like a carpool? You guys all get in a car?
Yeah, exactly that. So
yeah,
we'll get a pool car from Archer and our employers, and then we'll kind of we'll take it in turns to do the driving basically. So Pat will do a bit, Dave will do a bit, I'll do a bit. Adam, our video guy, also comes. So there's 4 of us. So it's quite nice. We enjoy it. I think. Well, I enjoy it. I don't know about them, but it's good fun usually.
We'll ask them when we get them on the pod. We'll ask them if they enjoy it.
He'll probably tell you it's terrible and the conversations are boring and
So pre-COVID, I assume you guys aren't wearing masks. Do you have to wear masks in the car or
there was a point pretty much throughout the whole pandemic where as a rule only 2 of us would go to away games. So usually it was kind of Paddy and Dave, so I'd stay at home and watch them on a screen like everyone else would. But from August, I think the restrictions in the UK have been a lot milder, a lot tamer, to say the least. So we haven't. So yeah, that's been nice because we've all been able to go back, and it's felt a bit more like normality, even though it's a bit surreal at times.
Yeah, but, I mean, with the vaccines and stuff, there's less. It's like, okay, we're vaccinated, so maybe we won't die. If we're in the car for 2 hours, that sort of segue into. So I would assume at Carrow Road, you always sit in the same seating area.
Yes, so we're usually there's 2 rows to the press box. So you've got 2 rows on the right. So I'm usually in the front row to the right, but it depends because if there's more media in, then we tend to get shifted up or shifted down accordingly. So we're usually next to the away team media. So if you've got Manchester City and they're bringing 6 or 7, we get pushed along towards the end of the row. If they're playing in the FA Cup against the League One side, they might have 3 members of staff and we might get pushed up the other way, for example. So we're always on the same row, but we get shifted about a little bit. So
interesting. So you don't have reserved seats. I would tend to think the home would go like, okay, here's the home
media gets their spots and everybody else
gets reserved spots with your name here. And then the away would be, so I'm just into my experience from different baseball stadiums and taking tours and asking questions. You always got the impression, that the beat writers always had the stuff. Okay, then the away guys, okay, here are your seats, who's coming. Then they'll put the little placard up, but they're never getting the front row seats and never getting the prime seats. They're getting, okay, you're you're away. Here's what we have, reserved for you.
Yeah, and that does, that tends to be how it is. So if I was an away reporter, doing what I do at Carrow Road, for example, I'll be on the back row.
Mm-hmm.
So it varies a little bit, and we've experienced it before. There's one club in particular, which maybe I won't name, which is not the best press box in the world, not the best view in the world. And if you're in the back row, then it's not a great experience, basically. And we found that again this season. So yeah, every club is kind of similar in that regard. As a general rule of thumb, we have 4 seats, and they're the 4 seats that we kind of sit in, really.
So that's the question.
So
how much does it vary? I'm assuming places, with the larger stadiums, like, the Manchester stadiums, Liverpool, Tottenham, West Ham, you probably have really nice seats with good views. But, what's it like going to some other ones that are not as modern and large?
So it's a really good question. Tottenham's superb. The whole experience is superb, and I'm sure it is for fans as well. The stadium's good, the facilities are good, the media facilities are top class. Old Trafford, the Etihad, all good. Chelsea good, Arsenal good. There are some press boxes, Everton, where it's still wooden seats. You're still in kind of elbow to elbow, we say. So it's really tight. If someone wants to get out of the row, you all have to get out. It's kind of, we're talking about that in the Premier League, which is quite amazing, really. There's Crystal Palace, for example, which isn't particularly great. There are various others which still, Burnley is not too bad, actually, but I'm quite scared of heights, and you're right at the back of the stand, and it's quite a trek up there, and it's a really steep stand as well. So
I've seen some.
That's a little bit tough.
Arlo White, who's the main commentator. I'm sure you know who Arlo is. Every once in a while, he'll do a time-lapse video of his walk. It's like, oh, join me on my walk up to the gantry for our broadcasting position. And some of that, I was like, oh my God, what are you? It's like so many multiple steps. Sometimes you go up and then you go down. And it's insane what he has to go through for a broadcasting position, as opposed to the stadiums in the US. Oh, you just take an elevator and you're on that level.
Yeah, that was the case. What ground? Brentford. It was the case. So yeah, I'm fortunate that I don't have to go and stand on the gantry every week, because I think I'd probably have some kind of panic attack or something, because if my feet are off the floor, I'm not very happy, basically, in terms of height. So for us, we're quite fortunate. We tend to be put in the stand, and the position's usually pretty good. So I can't have any complaints on that front. But Brentford is the first experience I've ever had. Obviously, it's a fairly new ground, where you go in, your name's down on a list, you show them your pass, you show them your COVID pass and whatnot, and then it's right, there's a lift up, you go up there, and then it's a couple of steps to the press room, and that's quite rare. Maybe it's something we'll see in stadiums that will come in the next decade, but at the moment it can be lots of stairs.
And this is something I was going to ask you about with the stadiums. I mean, you guys, when we talk about being up in the gantry, you have a roof, but it's totally open in front, right? You typically don't have windows.
No, yeah, exactly.
Correct. That. So you're exposed to the elements. Our press boxes over here for our stadiums, sometimes you'll have windows that'll open if you want to open up to get more of that crowd noise and everything, but a lot of them tend to be shut. And while you might get a PA announcer's feed piped in through speakers, you're pretty well sealed off in a lot of the press boxes. Certainly, for me at the high school level, Ken's probably been to more ballparks than I have.
Yeah,
I know those at least have the windows that open. Yeah. But you see a lot of stadiums, especially the football stadiums, they tend to be sealed off.
Right.
So you're not exposed to the elements, and you've got a lot more open. But I think about all the high school stadiums I've been to the last 4 or 5 years working as a coach now. Those tend to all be sealed off. A few have open window opportunities, but those do tend to be actually older stadiums. We tend to keep them sealed off. But yeah, I can relate with some places that I've had to go because even though I'm a coach, I mean, I've worked in media, but I'm a coach now, and I've had to hunt down a spot, figure out where am I actually going to go. And sometimes I've been on a roof before. We had a game last year where even though I was doing coaching duties, I was actually upstairs on a roof with my film crew for the game. And and right behind me were the broadcasters for our game because they didn't have anywhere else to go either. It was a real tight situation.
Yeah,
So go ahead.
From what I've seen at various different, of course, most of the NFL stadiums, the print media is behind, closed windows and stuff like that. The broadcast, of course, it's open. For Camden Yards, where the Baltimore Orioles play, that press box is open. That they can close the windows, but for the game, it is open. So there's many reports of balls, hitting drinking vessels or laptops and
Right.
whatever. I've been there. I've been inside press boxes in other different stadiums, and the ones I've seen are generally closed, but they can be open depending where they are. Of course, the broadcast media is TV and radio is open, but I just know at Camden Yards it's open. Other ones it's closed. I've been the Fenway Park. Fenway Park's weird, let me tell you. Where the Red Sox play, everything there other than their broadcast is open, but that's an antiquated stadium. That's probably like one of the older stadiums where people are really crammed in.
Right.
But generally, only the broadcast media is open to the elements. The print reporters and whatever are generally not. I think Camden Yards, they're there if it's pouring down rain and stuff. They'll take the windows down so stuff doesn't get clobbered. For the game.
Right.
For the game, it's open. They want to hear what's going on. They want to see what's going on. That if a guy is covering the game, especially with Twitter, that they want to be able to say, hey, it appears a manager is yelling at this player, this umpire, because X, Y, and Z, and they can't really do that with the windows closed. And also, the locations vary, especially in baseball, how close they are to home plate, how high they are, depending on the stadium. Obviously, it's better the lower you are. In DC, where the Nationals are, the press box is so high. It would be like equivalent to the highest levels in some of the larger stadiums if it was like way up in the top level, which really is not good. It's too high up. You really don't get a good view of it. So it's interesting. Let's see what else we hear. We'll skip a little bit. The difference between Daniel Farker and Dean Smith for covering, because you have one guy English not his first language, another guy English is the second language, and it appears that how they conduct their press conferences is different, and possibly how comfortable they are giving more like ad hoc responses. So can you tell us whether that seems accurate or not? Because I pulled up, what was it? It's for other stuff. They both managed 11 matches this year, so it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So the first thing and I'd agree with what you said there. Really, the first change that we saw was a change in time of the press conference. So that's usually set by the head coach. They can dictate whenever they want to do a press conference. I think there's a Premier League rule saying they have to do it before a certain time. So Daniel primarily was anywhere between 12:30 to 1:45 as a general rule of thumb.
Okay.
Dean Smith, when he came in, said, actually, no, I want to move those to 9 a.m. on a Friday. So that was a shift in time. So we go from a lunchtime presser to a Friday morning presser. which is a bit of a bonus for us because obviously it's more time to file content and,
Sure.
and you're not working as late, so that's a bonus. But also his press conferences are a lot shorter. So a typical Daniel Farke press conference would be about an hour, and if it was under an hour, you'd say that was a short press conference. For Dean Smith, it can be anywhere between 25 minutes. I think the longest one we've had is 32 minutes. So it gives you an example in terms of the answers that they give to the same amount of questions as a general rule. Daniel was very good with the media. You'd ask him a question, you get a very thorough answer. He spoke a lot, like you said, considering English wasn't his first language. His use of analogies and different putting bits in context was very interesting. We had I see Jeff laughing. We had some brilliant ones about Keira Knightley and Julie from the Village, and we had lots of different analogies that he used and put in football in context, which was very interesting. I always found him fascinating. I thought he spoke about the game well. He spoke about players well. Just a very interesting human being, and was also very open about things. So it would be, okay, what's the injury status with this player? He's out for this long. Here's his problem. We'll expect him to be back for this game. And that was the case. When Dean Smith was appointed, funny enough, I got a message from a Villa reporter who I know quite well now. And he went, Dean Smith can be a bit reserved about injuries. So he might say, this player's out, but he won't necessarily give you a time frame or a specific, here's what's wrong with him. So that was interesting, first and foremost, because you've gone from having this kind of complete openness to players and who was available and who wasn't, to suddenly someone who's a bit more reserved at sort of parting with that information. But yeah, I would say Smith is a good talker. I think he answers questions to the point, and I think that could get mistaken for bluntness, and I don't think it is bluntness. I think you ask him a question, you get an answer. It's as simple as that. I think with Daniel, you'd ask him a question, you get an answer, you get a lot of stuff that followed. Which sometimes was really good. Sometimes he kind of lost his way during an answer a little bit, and he'd give an 8-minute monologue or something. You won't get that with Dean Smith. So again, two very different styles of how they use the media, but both very interesting for different reasons. And I think actually, since Dean Smith has come in, I've agreed with a lot of what he said and how he said it. But from our perspective, you probably have to ask more questions to get the information you want on a certain topic, whereas with Daniel it used to be just you ask one question and away you went. So it's been fascinating to kind of witness the change in head coaches and how they deal with different questions.
Interesting. I also sensed, because English is not his first language, and I'm very impressed with how many people in Europe know multiple languages and speak them fluently. Yeah. In the U.S., that's a very small. I mean, I took 4 years of Spanish. I understand it, but I can't have a conversation with a native Spanish speaker. I'm not conversational at any point in time. Like, who is it? What was it? Lukaku knows like 8 languages or something. Yeah. It's just something insane. I have a friend at work when I go back, whenever that will be. He's still in person. He's from the Czech Republic, so he knows Czech, he knows German, he knows English, he knows Japanese because he spent a year in Japan, and he was learning Spanish. It's like insane. And he works in the international field with dealing with people, especially in Europe and some of the Asian countries dealing with automotive regulations. So it's a benefit that he knows all of these languages. I just find it interesting. But with Daniel, with him not having English as the first language, it seemed like he would have pauses like, how do I need to translate what I want to say in German into English to make sure it comes off properly? So
it's interesting you say that, Ken, because I listened to the FC Krasnodar link for his first official press conference, and it was very, very similar to a presser at Norwich, with the ums and the ahs and the starting off, yeah, all the yeahs, and that's exactly right. It buys time to think how you translate things, and he will certainly endear himself to the fans and supporters and press people and Krasnodar, no doubt, for the same reason that he did endear himself to the fans of Norwich. It
was interesting, the time change, because I just got the sense that you ask Dean Smith a question, he'll just give you the answer. Daniel would go, let me think about how I want to answer this and make sure I'm going to give you the answer in the English that I want to give you, not, maybe using a German term that doesn't necessarily translate very well. I thought he was very open, but it definitely seemed like there is a different way of covering, each. And the time change, I knew something changed. I just didn't know that the time changed. Yeah, I would tend to think doing it at 9 a.m. would be better for you guys because you actually know a time versus Daniel saying, well, it could be 11:30 and we'll go to 12:15 next week. Having a little more surety, would help
Yeah.
you get rolling. At 9 o'clock is not too. 8 o'clock for me is brutal. I hate anybody who would ever an 8 o'clock meeting. 9 o'clock, all right, I can deal with that. And knowing that's what you have, going on regularly is kind of interesting. Along that same line, favorite players to interview, and you haven't been working the club that long, so going back, I'm not gonna say, oh, Jeremy Goss or something like that. Favorite players, like favorite current players, favorite players that are no longer with Norwich to interview. I don't want to hear who you don't like because we assume everyone's likable. I'm they're not going to talk about it. But favorite players to interview and interact with, and why?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I haven't had one that I've come away from speaking to and being like they're horrendous. So that's
encouraging.
That's a positive. There are some which are a little bit more, again, like Dean Smith, to be honest, a little bit more to the point, and some who are a bit more conversational. And that's part of the course. That's human beings, isn't it? You might speak to someone and they're a little shorter in their answers than me when I ramble on, for example. So it all depends. So in terms of my favorite ones to do, I did Alex Tetty just before he left the club, and he was
brilliant.
We would love to have Teddy do this. We're gonna try and figure out how to get him on this.
He's brilliant. He's everything you'd want him to be, really. So that was good, and he was also so I kind of, Alex Tetty was one of the players that I grew up watching in the Norwich shirt. So to be sat opposite him in a dressing room as really, I think someone did an interview after me, but it was his kind of second final interview ever as a Norwich City player. That was quite a big thing for me personally, to be sat in that situation. And he was brilliant and a pleasure to talk to. And we spoke to him about 10 minutes about his career at Norwich, about what he was hoping to do. That was good. And the other one, which may surprise you, was Emi Buendia. I had a really good conversation with him. It would have been last year around November time. And it was over Zoom, and we had a really good chat about him. And I think it was the first time he'd done any of the local media, because his English wasn't great when he first signed for the club. So it took him a little while. And I did it, and I was on there with a journalist from the Independent, and we did half an hour each, and he was sat in his house. And
not Trent Krim, right? Not Trent Krim from the Independent.
No, not him.
You know the reference?
I know Ted Lasso. Yeah, I know the reference.
Lasso,
absolutely. No, it wasn't him, sadly. But yeah, we were speaking to Buendia in his house, and he was in this armchair, and every so often his kid would come in and interrupt, and it would be really sweet. But he was, I found him a delight to talk to be honest. So that was good. Ben Gibson is good. Grant Hanley's good. Tim Krul is excellent. Whenever you can chat with him. Funny enough, I've had a chat with Todd Cantwell before, and I've always found him to be very, very good talker, very deep thinker about life. I think I can only speak for the times I've met him. Obviously, I'm not with him at the training ground all the time, but every time I've spoken to him, I've found him really delightful, to be honest, and a really intelligent lad. And he's only a couple of years older than me, so maybe that helps as well. So those are all good examples. That was
going to be a follow up that I had. Keep going.
Yeah. So that was those are all good ones, but I think Tetty is the one that stands out in my mind as being one where I was like, wow, yeah, this is good. So yeah, probably Tetty my favorite at the minute.
Yeah, you can sort of tell, like, because sometimes I'll like, training video sometimes I'll watch it. The City View, I'm interested of watching. Generally, if they actually score a goal, if they got clobbered, I'm not really looking at the City View to see what's going on. But you get a sense of how open they are, their personalities. You sort of see how they interact with the fans, how they interact with the other players. So that's not surprising. Buendia, it just seemed like he was a very energetic, joyous person. So I'm not surprised that he gave you, a good interview, even though he did score for Villa, so that helped us.
Yes, it did. It did.
Agent Buendia, right? Agent Buendia.
Yeah, I think most people kind of saw him as, obviously, I mean, the season he had, I can't remember a player having as good an individual season as that. But sometimes with these interviews, you can kind of feel like it's player, particularly when there's a national media outlet involved. And, as is the case, sometimes it can be done with a view to what it means for his career. And I never really got that sense. He was very good, like we spoke about his temperament, for example. It was a big sort of talking point at that time. He'd walk around, he'd wave his arms in the air. He was a little bit feisty, and he was very good on that. And I just found him very, and maybe it's because he's got, I don't think his second born was alive at that point, but he certainly had his kid, and I just found him very mature for his age. Again, he's not too much older than me, really, but he was very good and probably surprising. Really, he surprised me, to be honest, in that interview. And when you see a player with the ability that he's got and the way he spoke, I think it became pretty apparent that he's going to go on to bigger and better things. And we're obviously seeing him now under Steven Gerrard for Aston Villa, beginning to slowly find his form in the Premier League. So yeah, it's good to see.
Gerrard's picture showed up in the Baltimore Sun today because they're talking about choosing World Cup locations for the 2026 World Cup, and they had a picture of him walking off where the Ravens play football. They had a friendly. It was Tottenham versus Liverpool in 2012, and there's a picture of Gerrard walking off. Oh, I was at that, and let me tell you, that was like 90% Liverpool, 10% Tottenham. As far as the fan base, but the people that showed up, the attire was all over the board. My son, who's a big FIFA fan, loved pointing out the clubs, the countries. It was just amazing, the entire perspective there. And at that time, I had like an off-brand. It says like Canaries. There's a company called Who Are Ya in the United States as a T-shirt. So I wore that. Didn't really have anything. It said someone was tricked out. Full kit wanker for Grant Holt was there. Didn't see him. But later, after that, we went to a hotel that we'd parked at lots of times for the Baltimore Orioles games, and we know there was like a cafe to hang out and go to the bathroom. All of a sudden, a guy taps me on the shoulder, and he starts giving me crap, and I then realize, oh, this is an Ipswich dude. My son's like, how did you not know the crest? It's like, don't pay attention. They were in the Premier League. Ipswich is not in the Premier League. It was, it was good-natured bantering. It was funny though. It was like, oh, okay. I just remember this guy. Oh, you got to come away from the dark side. Join us. So I was like, you're on the dark side. So
you did well to find an Ipswich fan. So that's the first.
There were fans I remember there were two people in our section wearing Hull City polos. I'm like, Hull City? Who the heck are they? What happens next year? They get promoted. The next year, and then they went back down. Like, Hull City. It was just funny because they were the only ones wearing something that looked like a country club sort of a thing, like Hull City Golf Club or something. They didn't look like any. So that was kind of fun. You mentioned the age. So, like I said, when I worked for the Colts, so I was in college at the time, 20 or something. So I gravitated towards the rookies and the second year guys as far as hanging out and being more comfortable talking to them, just because of the age gap, wasn't very large, as opposed to a guy who was in his older 30s. Do you find that happens with you, that it's more comfortable you talking to some of the younger guys versus, let's say, Michael McGovern? Is McGovern like the oldest on the team or something like that?
Yeah, I think he is. Yes and no. I think it's. I tend to find it. You find that more in terms of who you connect with based on personality. I think maybe more than age. So someone like Ben Gibson, who I mean, I'm not casting Ben Gibson as old because he's certainly not, but he's an experienced player. But I've had a lot of really good conversations with him. I remember one in particular on the side of the pitch in Stoke after Norwich had won 3-2, and it was absolutely freezing, and I was stood there with my phone in my hand, and my hand was shaking, and he was making some jokes about that, so that was good. He was stood there, of course, in just a football shirt and some shorts with some flip flops on. So and I was stood there in about 7 layers with scarf on and shaking like anything because I was freezing. So he made me look a bit of a fool that night, but that was good. But yeah, as a general rule of thumb, you tend to find the younger lads maybe are a bit more. It's a little bit easier to speak to them because I think they recognise instantly that we're not a million miles off in terms of age. So
right,
you can use it as your advantage. I think it also helps me in a little way in that if I need to ask a tough question, I think sometimes that can help because, as I say, there's maybe a little bit of an understanding in terms of youth. To be honest, I haven't had to ask too many tough ones. This year because as a general rule it's been Dave that's been chatting to the players, so he's had that tough job. But yeah, the conversations that I've had with every player, I've always found them to be very good. Like I say, there's not one that has ever been rude or been horrible or not answered the question in the right way. So it's good, and I always find it really interesting to speak to players. It's quite difficult immediately after a game. It's a difficult job to go down and ask players questions, I find. But when you get them and you can sit down with them and have a bit more depth to it, I tend to find those are the conversations where you get more out of people, and that you tend to find they open up a little bit more. So, it's interesting that you ask about the age element because I think when I think about it, you probably do get that understanding from those maybe younger players more so than perhaps the experienced ones.
Yeah, I mean, I experienced it because when I was there, I got to eat with the players, which isn't a great idea when you're not doing 2 intense practices a day and you're eating the same food they do. You gain weight. Trust me. When you ask for a small piece of apple pie and they give you a piece the size of your head, or something like that. So I gravitated towards the younger. So so in the time we have left, because I know the first game's like at 15 minutes or so. So they won. And Sargent did well. I'd love to know, like the away crowd seemed really insanely pumped. We got the broadcast. Had there was a drummer or something like that. Mark saying that the drummer, but the crowd seemed incredibly pumped afterwards, very energetic. When Sargent was doing his interview, whoever was doing the sideline interview was, "Hey Josh," you wave to them, they're calling his name and stuff like that. So I'm curious what that is. And then one thing I love now, we don't have time for this, when they chant on TV, I don't have a clue what they're saying. The announcers are never going to say anything. I'm like, oh, they're singing On the Ball City. Okay, I can hear that. Oh, they're singing, when the Saints come marching in. Okay, but certain things. I remember several years ago, I asked Robin Saint, says, they're doing the 12 Days of Christmas, but with different lyrics. What was that? He goes, oh, it's 12 Huckabees. Oh, of course. So I'm just, So the whole reaction, and then the USA stuff was, I was like, whoa, I was very, very surprised, with the USA chants that were coming. So go ahead. I'm just curious what your impression was of everything, with how the
it was brilliant. So Vicarage Road, the press box is kind of so you'd have seen it on TV. It's called the Elton John stand. It's the one opposite, and it's at the back, and we were kind of to the right, so we were positioned right next to the away fans, and they were brilliant. And I kept thinking, and they were brilliant at 0-0. It's worth saying as well. It wasn't just the goals went in and Norwich were winning, and then suddenly the noise came. That wasn't the case.
The whole time. Sorry to interrupt you, but it was the whole time, and that was extremely impressive.
It was, and there were. Yeah, there was only 2,300 of them, but it sounded like 20,000 throughout the game. And I kind of think about some of the stuff I saw at Crystal Palace a few weeks ago when there were chants at the players of "You're not fit to wear the shirt," and there was a lot of humour, or gallows humour, we call it here, which is like dark humour, essentially. When
hey, pretend we scored a goal. Hey,
precisely, yeah. And so this wasn't that. It was brilliant, as you say. There was a drum, and to be honest, it's quite a controversial topic, having a drum in an English football grounds, and I've kind of always been a bit, I don't know if I like it or not, but having witnessed it on Friday night, brilliant, really added to the atmosphere, and they were great, and it was a great night, and there was a case where the game had finished, all the Watford fans had gone, and there was still the vast majority of fans there, as you mentioned, for the post-match interviews. The away end was still full. The stewards literally had to push. Well, had to go up the away end to push people out of it, because otherwise the Norwich fans would have stayed there and danced.
Yeah, watch it on TV. So I watched the matches with whatever the commentators are. Mark and Jeff like listening to Chris Gorham.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have Chris on, I'll have to apologize and get yelled at or something. It was very hard to hear what Josh was saying, because he wasn't, talking really loud. I'm like, it's like, God, kept it. Can you turn it up? Can you turn it up? Because the noise was just so overwhelming. And whoever was interviewing, the female was interviewing, he says, you want to wave to the fans? He waved, and they're like, hey! It was just kind of.
Hey, Josh, give us a wave. Hey, Josh,
give us the waves. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was delighted for Josh, because he's had a tough start to life at Norwich, and you think about obviously the chance against Brighton that he missed, and some of the stuff that he's had in his direction has been pretty close to ridicule, to be honest. Sergeant scores or on the pitch and stuff like that. It's been tough for him, and I can imagine what it's been like personally to have to deal with that, because as much as the club have a ignore the noise mantra, which is nice in when it's worded like that, and it's admirable, but when there's so much of it, it can be quite hard to ignore, whether you're on social media or not. And
right.
He's had a lot of criticism. So, what a first goal to score, by the way, first and foremost. But the fact
that's got to be a Puskas nominee. If that's not in the Puskas finalists for next year, then I don't know what we're talking about.
No, me neither. But he's worked so hard, and he's ran so hard, and he's had opportunities where the ball's bobbled up and it's hit him and not quite hit him in the right way, and he just doesn't seem to have had the luck on his side. Finally, he produces a moment of magic. It hits the bar, and you're thinking, it's Josh Sargent, so it's probably bounced the wrong side of the line, and it's not going to count. But fortunately, the luck was there, and then I think it showed with what he did a few minutes later in scoring the second goal. So I was really happy for him on a personal level, because I've kind of seen throughout the year what he's had to contend with, and it's not been easy, and it's not easy for any player. But hopefully now he's off the mark and he's got those 2 goals, we'll begin to see the player which I think most people hoped that Norwich City had signed last summer.
The 2 guys who were on the broadcast for was it the USA? Yeah, whatever the NBC.
It's NBC. Yeah,
NBC. They're both named Danny or Daniel, whose names I'd never heard of before. Both of them. It says like, hey, that first goal was magic, but the second one, that's a proper striker's goal. That really shows that the proper technique, that he understands stuff. That's what you're looking for. A goal like that. The first one, okay, he got lucky. It may have been something that he practiced and had the skill set. But the second one that's what you're looking for. They get it.
Yeah. It was kind of like if Grant Holt scored that goal, or Ewan Roberts scored that goal, or whatever, it's a proper number 9's goal. The first one is spectacular for a lot of reasons, but as you said there, the second one was almost more impressive, because he had a lot to do. I mean, he almost timed his run well. It was a late run really before he leapt and met the ball, and it seemed like his jump was completely fueled by this confidence that he'd discovered from the first. It was excellent, and that was probably the moment really where, if you're a Norwich fan, you looked at it and you thought, yeah, this game's done now. So, yeah, as I said, so pleased for him, because few have worked harder and had to endure more stick. Maybe Billy Gilmore, but beyond that, it's been a tough year for Josh. So I'm really happy for him.
That's a great segue, Connor, because I know we're getting close to time, and we're trying to be respectful of your time. It's getting late there. And I must say, as energized as we three are, we're all Americans, but the AmeriCanaries, comprise North America, Central America, and South America. So it's not just about,
Or the Americas, right?
Let's put it that way. And as happy as we are about that, and as exciting as it is to see this reinvigorated and playing with passion and going at defenses and taking it to them instead of having 20 passes before a shot or whatever. I must ask, in your opinion, this group, you think we've got what it takes to stay up in the Premier League? That seems to be the question. Do you think we've got the players and now the confidence and the organization and the backing of the coach and just across the board to stay up in the Premier League?
Yes, yeah, I do. And that's really changed in the last couple of weeks, if I'm being honest with you.
Agreed.
And I think a lot of it was I wanted to see what happened after what was a very difficult festive period because of the injuries and the depletion of the squad. And let's be honest, sometimes managers come out and go, I've got no players and it will be better without the injuries and whatnot. And you kind of think, okay, but you're bottom of the league, you've got 10 points and whatever. And actually, I think Dean Smith's proven to be correct that actually a lot of it was injuries and a lot of it was the fact the squad was so low on confidence and whatnot. And the back-to-back wins now, Everton was big, Watford was huge. I think it's game on, and I think they've got a head coach who knows. Again, no disrespect to Daniel Farke, but he's been around the block, hasn't he? He's been in this situation before with Aston Villa. There's a lot of different stuff tactically, which I know we haven't got the time to go into, that they're doing at the moment, which I think is making that a better chance. So, yeah, I've gone from 2 weeks ago thinking it was dead and buried and it would be about how badly they got relegated to looking at it now and going, you know what, they've got a hell of a chance here to get themselves out of it, particularly when you look at the next Premier League game is Crystal Palace at home. What an opportunity. So, yeah, why not? Hope is back, and that's what Norwich fans need. They're conceding fewer goals. They're scoring more. They're more solid all over the pitch. They've improved under Dean Smith. I think it should now be, why can't they stay up rather than will they stay up? And I honestly think they can do it, but they're going to need more results like we saw on Friday night, I think. And it feels like the mentality shifted in the group. So I really hope they can, to be honest.
The faces, just the sheer elation of the faces now when they hug for a goal, they get together and they hug for a goal and they, why can't they do that? They're a group of young guys that are determined to do it. I love your answer. I think that was fantastic. Yeah. And I must say, this morning I read Gary Gower's piece in My Football Writer about the credit that Grant Hanley and the defense maybe aren't getting because of the spectacular way that Josh Sargent scored and finally scored 2 goals. The defense was, where have they been? Where have they been? And every little bit of confidence builds, and that could very well be the difference. The way they know they can play, we can play this way now.
Mm-hmm. Well, they have to not only play that way against Crystal Palace, they have to play that way against the back-to-back against City and Liverpool, where
building on that confidence.
Even though they had that surprise win 2 years ago against Man City, Farke was almost like, well, we're gonna get clobbered. Let's just hope we don't get clobbered too bad. You got the sense that you just don't have a shot against these teams the way he was playing. Let's hope Dean Smith sets them up in a way that they have a shot against these teams, that it's not 80% and the whole half. Did Norwich get the ball over midfield yet? Let's hope it's distinctly different. I don't know how he's going to set it up, but it has to be not, oh God, what are we going to get clobbered? What was it? The Chelsea match? Was that the one that was like early on a Saturday? That's the only match I turned off. I got disgusted by halftime, and I had stuff that I had to get accomplished in a small window that day. So I just turned it off at halftime and, got stuff done, an hour earlier or whatever. Something else was happening. That's the only one. Says, forget it. They don't have a shot. What's the point in even watching? I remember when they got clobbered 7-1 by City, and my son's a City fan. We're watching that. That could have been 10, 11-1 or something at that time. It was just insane. The other point I wanted to make, the last 5 goals have either been a result of Sargent or Ida, with a little bit of Pukki involvement.
Yeah, that's massive when you consider that beyond Timu Pukki, Norwich had a line of attacking midfielders and strikers who hadn't scored and really weren't contributing much in terms of an attacking sort of output perspective. So massively important to those two as well, because it's their first Premier League goals, and goals can change players. As silly as it sounds, you get one and suddenly it's almost like you're walking on water in terms of confidence, and your shoulders are wider. It's kind of what we saw happen with Sargent in the game. He was suddenly holding off players, running through players, using his physicality in a better way, demanding the ball in certain situations. And I think Ida's been fantastic the last 2-3 games. It was a bit more of a struggle against Watford, I thought, but ultimately still sort of turned his defender once, and that led to the own goal. So he contributed, which is what we want. So, everything at the moment feels very positive. It's about maintaining that now, and if they can get a win against Palace, then I think there'll be a few people who are maybe looking at it and thinking that they've got a real chance.
Yeah, I mean, you even got a clean sheet of Angus Gunn, and Angus Gunn just doesn't give me a whole lot of confidence, right? At this point, I was like, I don't know. He somehow got a clean sheet out of that, so he has that to hold on to.
I don't know. Confidence builds confidence, right?
Yeah,
across the board.
What was the stat? Like him and his dad, or the only father and son that get a clean sheet for the same team, or something like that?
Yeah, in Premier League history. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, it's not surprising. It's like, how often do you have?
How many do you have? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but again, I mean, it's if Krul is out, 4 to 6 weeks?
That's how long. That was the question. How long is he going to be out for? Do you know, Connor?
I think saw
4 to 6 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay. So he won't be back for Palace.
Builds confidence.
But then you've got to think Norwich's next Premier League game isn't until early February, is it? So I mean, hopefully 2 of those weeks, so half the time will be obviously the winter break that we're going into this weekend, but also the FA Cup game against Wolves. So when you look at it like that, it's maybe not as bad as it could be. Hopefully it's towards or closer to the 4 than the 6. And he misses fewer Premier League
odds
games.
are he's maybe not back for Crystal Palace, but you tend to think you want him back for City and Liverpool, obviously.
Yeah. I'd certainly be looking at a Liverpool game and thinking if you could get him back for then, that would be spot on. Yeah.
But that song, I mean, that has to build confidence. He's back. The song is back. I mean, come on, how can you not?
I think it was just breaking the cycle, I think, wasn't it? I mean, when you look at those numbers, and it was obviously 9-0 against Leicester for Southampton, and there's some poor defeats in there for Norwich as well. I don't think it was wholly his fault. He obviously wasn't particularly well protected by a defence that was pretty depleted. So I don't think it's a surprise when Norwich returned to what I think is their best back four. He didn't really have much to do. I think there was one situation late on in the game where he needed to be a bit more commanding and come out and get the ball. I think when Sargent nodded it back to him, and
that was weird.
Had to flick the header off the line. But then he set himself back well, and obviously saved the follow-up shot that came. And I think like we speak about strikers and goals and confidence, a clean sheet might be all he needs, and we might see a more commanding goalkeeper, a more confident, comfortable goalkeeper. Because 2 to 3 years ago when he was on loan, I saw a really talented young goalkeeper, and if Norwich City can get him back to that, then everyone knows the talent that he's got, and it would be a lovely story as well because of what we've spoken about in terms of Brian and the history of the club. It feels right, doesn't it, to have a gunning goal for Norwich City? So
absolutely,
I really do wish him well, and I hope this will be a turning point. And who knows, if he does so well and keeps clean sheets, he's got an opportunity in a run of games now to prove himself as Norwich City's goalkeeper, which is ultimately what he would have wanted when he signed. So the ball's in his court, and he's if he can do it, then who knows? Maybe he can keep Tim Krul out for a little bit longer.
Yeah,
Tim Krul might disagree with that, but yeah.
Yes, I think he will. Yes,
he will. Yeah, surely.
Yeah, I mean, as my son and
Connor's got to answer to that one, not us.
I know. As my son and I say, how many goalkeepers were substituted by their country's team specifically for penalty kicks, knowing how good he was.
Mhm.
I think they won that. I'm pretty sure when whoever they were playing, they won that. It's like, oh, Tim Krul's coming in because he's just a pain in the butt on penalty kicks. So at least with because before Krul, the long term was Ruddy, and I never got the sense that Ruddy actually could save a penalty kick. I always got the sense it was pure luck with him versus Krul. He sort of understands what's going on. You have a sense that he will save a penalty kick, and you're surprised when he doesn't. So it's just the other way around. I see Krul as more a proactive goalkeeper than reactive, versus taking the right angles, knowing what's going on, anticipating, as opposed to relying on their reactions. And I just tend to like that better. Before this, I was watching, Chelsea beat Tottenham for the 4th time. These guys know I like Tottenham also. Lloris, even though he won, the World Cup with France, he's too reactive. He doesn't. There's way too many times where he's not in the right position or he doesn't make the move. And Krul just generally doesn't seem he's ever in that position. There's some goals that he just has no chance. No one's going to save, goals coming in. But you get the sense that he knows what's going on. He's going to be in the right position. He's going to move to the right area to get it. He's going to try and cut off the angle. And some of the other goalies, you just don't sense that. You sense that they're, reticent to do something, or they're, not reacting fast enough. So that's what I like about. Also, he's clearly a leader. He's the leader out there. So I like saying that. All right, what else do we have? So before we wrap this up, we're already at an hour and 30 minutes here of Connor's amazing time that he spent with us. What do you have, Mark? What do you have, Jeff? Let Connor go back to watching NFL or writing stories or whatever he's going to do. Oh, but by the way, if you see Robin Sainty, congratulate him on the Niners victory. Robin is a Niners fan.
I will do.
Oh yeah, I need to get back to that too.
Yeah, I forgot to send him a little message. He probably didn't watch it because it was a late game. You'd have to turn it on at midnight.
I think he did. He said he was going to be completely spent.
Oh really? Yeah,
I
didn't contact them and see what the deal is.
Yeah. Having just watched the replay of the match from Friday this morning, just because I was busy working and whatnot, the one person I want to give mention to is McLean, because Kenny came on, after Gino's got hurt, picked up a yellow like 17 minutes later and played the rest of that game on that yellow, doing what he needed to do. And he set up the first 2 goals. His passes set up both of those first 2 goals. So I just wanted to give him a little credit for that, because he's caught some crap. But
the mayor? Yeah. Send him a case of MD 2020. He'll appreciate that.
Yeah. But I just went back. I mean, that the pass to Pookie that went down low, went all the way down to the line, and then the second one too started with him moving it forward, because we've talked about the midfield play not feeding the beasts, and he did that. He did that. I mean, everybody else had their roles. I mean, Rashika and everybody, but Kenny did as well. So, and he did it more from the back. So I just wanted to go with that observation that hadn't been mentioned. So Jeff? Other than that.
No, I asked my question. I was very keen to see what he thought about staying up, and, the new excitement, and the prolonged period of time off, I think, will help. I mean, we're still lacking a couple of players, right? I mean, Norman should be back theoretically.
He's back next game, from what I understand.
True. Okay, good.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well, thank Connor Southwell for joining us. This has been a treat. Thank you for being the first of the Norwich media to join us. We hope this is a regular component of our podcast, that we have special guests. I know we have 2 more that have already, 3 more, right?
Yep, 3 more.
3 more. have already agreed. We just have to schedule that, and we're trying to shoot high. As my son says, shooters got to shoot. So we've sent out inquiries to people who are covering the Premier League at a national level, and Jeff has even reached out to a certain number 9 who wore number 9. Let's see if they'll come on. So with that, we'd like to wrap up our podcast. Thank you very much, Connor, for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Please read his articles on. Go ahead. Give us the plugs, Connor.
Yeah, Pink and App probably the place to go now, really. Which is you can get a free trial on that for a minute, 30 days free. Plenty of good Norwich City content from people other than me, so that's well worth it. $1.99 thereafter. That's in English pounds, so I don't know what it would convert to US dollars, but for a month and plenty of Norwich City content, I think that's a pretty good deal. So that's usually the best place to go.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for those of you who are listening to this podcast. We hope to have more Norwich media people in the future, and possibly some former Norwich players. Probably not active players. That might be kind of tough. All right. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks. And by the way, when we talk to you in a couple of weeks, we'll still be out of the relegation zone.
Yep.
Which is great.
I like where you're headed, Dan. Good stuff.
All right. Thanks, everybody.